The story begins with a moment so sharp, so painfully ordinary, yet so heartbreaking that it stays embedded in the mind long after it happens. A tired father stepped into a bright, high-end bakery where the lights were warm, the glass shelves were full of lavish cakes, and the scent of fresh cream floated in the air like a reminder of everything he could not afford. He held his breath as he approached the counter, because this day mattered more than he could express. His little daughter had been waiting all year for her birthday, saving wishes like treasures, believing her father would somehow make magic happen. But today, the reality of empty pockets pressed against his ribs like a weight he could not lift, and still he asked, the simplest, humblest request, if there was a cheap cake he could buy. His voice wavered with hope, and that hope was met not with kindness but with laughter. The seller looked at him with disbelief, shrugged, and chuckled in a way that cut deeper than any insult. Yet neither the seller nor the observing crowd knew that someone important was standing right behind the father, someone who was about to change everything. Call to action #1 before the story unfolds further. If you believe in kindness, compassion, and second chances, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your support helps these meaningful stories reach more hearts. The father, named Daniel, had not always lived like this. Years ago, he had a stable job, a lively home, and dreams that matched his daughter's bright eyes. But life is unpredictable, and sometimes it takes a slow, quiet turn that pushes a man into shadows before he even realizes he is falling. A factory closure cost him his job. Unexpected medical bills drained his savings, and his wife's death left him raising a child alone while carrying grief like a stone that never softened. He took every small job he could find, cleaning, repairing, delivering, but nothing ever lasted long enough to bring security back into his home. His daughter, Emily, was only 7, yet she understood far too much. She stopped asking for toys, stopped wishing for new dresses, and stopped complaining when dinner was just soup again. The only thing she kept asking for was a birthday cake, one moment of sweetness in a world that had grown bitter around them. Daniel had tried so hard. He picked up 2 extra shifts the week before her birthday, but his employer cut his hours without warning. He sold his old tools at the market just to gather a bit more money. He even walked miles instead of taking the bus to save every possible coin. And now, with what little he had walked into the bakery hoping he could buy a small cake. Nothing fancy, nothing extraordinary, just something his little girl could smile at. But the bakery he chose was not the kind that welcomed people with tight budgets. It was luxurious, polished, a place where wealthy families ordered towering cakes with gold accents. The laughter from the cellar echoed louder than the gentle music playing in the shop. Daniel's shoulders sank and his heart tightened. He wished at that moment that he had chosen a different bakery, or that he had not come at all. Behind him stood a young woman in her late 20s, dressed simply but elegantly. Her name was Grace, and she had come to order a cake for her company's anniversary celebration. She had been successful in her career, but she had not forgotten the days when she and her mother struggled to afford even basic meals. The sound of the seller's laughter hit her like a painful memory. She watched Daniel lower his gaze in embarrassment, trying to hide the tremble in his hands. Something inside her stirred, a mix of empathy, anger, and a deep awareness of how cruelty can break a person quietly and completely. Daniel tried to explain himself gently, saying he just wanted the cheapest cake available, maybe a small one, maybe even yesterday's leftovers if the bakery had any. But the seller scoffed, shaking his head dismissively. To him, Daniel was just another poor man stepping into a place meant for richer customers. He didn't care about the story carried in Daniel's tired eyes or the love that pushed him to ask for something he clearly couldn't afford. The seller's loud, mocking laugh made 2 nearby customers smirk as well. Daniel felt heat rise in his cheeks, not from anger, but from humiliation so deep it almost made him step back and leave. But then he remembered Emily's hopeful face when she whispered the night before that she couldn't wait for her birthday. That memory held him still, even in the face of shame. Grace stepped closer, watching the scene like someone witnessing a wound reopen. She noticed the soles of Daniel's shoes, worn and uneven, the frayed edges of his shirt, the way he clutched a few wrinkled bills tightly in his palm. She realized he was trying to give his child something priceless, a happy memory, while the world around him treated him like he didn't deserve even that. Without thinking further, she approached the counter just as the seller turned away, muttering under his breath. Grace tapped the counter firmly, her expression calm but sharp. The seller straightened, expecting a wealthy customer's order, but Grace's tone carried quiet authority as she asked him why he had laughed at the man. The seller stumbled over his words, suddenly aware of her piercing stare. Grace didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her presence alone made the room fall silent. She ordered the largest and most beautiful cake in the bakery, layers of soft sponge, covered in delicate cream and decorated with strawberries, and then asked the seller to pack it carefully. As Daniel watched, confusion clouded his eyes. He didn't understand what was happening. Grace turned to him gently, and although she didn't speak, her eyes held warmth, understanding, and a silent reassurance that things were about to change. When the cake was ready, Grace paid for it, refusing the seller's attempt to justify his earlier behavior. She lifted the box and placed it into Daniel's trembling hands. For a moment he could not speak. He could barely breathe. He looked down at the beautiful cake and then up at the stranger who had stepped into his pain without hesitation. He wanted to refuse, but Grace simply nodded, as if telling him he deserved kindness just as much as anyone else. His eyes filled with tears that he quickly wiped away, afraid to break down in public. Grace noticed, but she did not react. She had learned long ago that dignity is fragile and protecting it is a gift. Outside the bakery, Daniel sat on a nearby bench, holding the cake like something sacred. He thought of Emily's joy, how her face would light up, how she would feel loved and celebrated even in their small home. His tears finally fell freely. He cried for the struggle, for the humiliation, for the unexpected kindness, and for the reminder that the world still had gentle souls in it. He whispered a silent prayer for the stranger who had helped him, and he promised himself he would pay this kindness forward someday, somehow. When Daniel arrived home, Emily ran toward him with excitement bubbling out of her tiny frame. The moment she saw the cake, her mouth opened in awe, and she clasped her hands together like she had received the greatest gift in the world. Daniel's heart expanded at the sight. That night, they lit a single candle and celebrated in their small living room. There were no decorations, no fancy plates, no guests, just a father, his daughter, and the soft glow of a candle illuminating their laughter. It was more beautiful than any grand party could ever be. Grace, meanwhile, couldn't stop thinking about the incident. She wondered how many others suffered quietly, how many people were dismissed or belittled just because they lacked wealth. She realized she wanted to do more than just buy a cake for one man. Days later, she started a small initiative at her company encouraging employees to anonymously sponsor meals, school supplies, or small celebrations for struggling families. The initiative grew quickly, inspiring people who had never thought about helping others in such simple but meaningful ways. Months passed, and Daniel's life began to shift. A neighbor helped him find stable work at a workshop. The income wasn't large, but it gave him consistency, hope, and a sense of purpose. Emily started doing better at school, smiling more often, carrying the memory of that birthday like a lucky charm. And Daniel held on to the belief that kindness, unexpected, quiet, and powerful, could change the direction of a life. Call to action #2 near ending. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like, share, comment, and subscribe. Your engagement truly helps these inspiring stories continue. As the story neared its gentle conclusion, there remained one more request, one that mattered deeply. Before you leave this video, Please comment just one word that describes how this story made you feel.